Whether it be anime or otherwise, entertainment has a habit of being drawn to the emotionally closed off, unfeeling, stunted, or reserved character. Maybe it's because we understand on some level that art thrives upon human emotion and experience, hence why when we come across a character that is seemingly devoid of that very emotionality, there's an inherent curiosity that develops around them about them. The risk with writing these kinds of characters is that they cannot remain emotionally stunted forever. There has to be some kind of development therein, lest the character be written off as bland. To Your Eternity was the spring 2021 anime season's newest attempt to wrestle with an emotionally unexpressive main character, and that was literally all that I knew about the story going in. Even knowing the inherent danger of writing a main character who has a narrow emotional range at first, I was eager to see how this material would address it. Trying to see a show tackle that problem can be quite interesting, depending on whether you want to get into a lore explanation or just through interaction with others. A mysterious orb is created and sent to Earth, completely unaware of any sense of self or emotion, but can take the shape of anything that leaves a strong impression on it. It eventually takes the form of a wolf and meets a white-haired boy living alone in a tundra. After a period of time, the boy dies from a wound he suffers, and the orb thus takes the boy's form and continues exploring the world. As the life form travels and eventually is given the name Fushi, it encounters numerous kinds of people, cultures, and ways of living. Along the way, Fushi gradually begins to learn not only what it means to live and die, but also to learn to fight against a strange, supernatural force that seems bent on destroying him. To Your Eternity's premise lays the foundation for its empathic effectiveness early, because Fushi is formless and, in essence, a tabula rasa. As a supernatural creature that is seemingly incapable of dying, he becomes able to take the shape of others only if they've left a strong impression on him somehow, so his ability to transform is more a response to an instinct rather than a learned behavior at first. As he begins to gain new experiences and grow, he becomes a part of numerous lives, and they become a part of his. He learns that it is through living that makes forming bonds stronger than simply having been left a strong impression. Watching Fushi reach this realization about bonding, and act upon it in later arcs, makes him a fascinating character to see, even if the idea of what precisely qualifies as a strong impression is not clear. But every character has to start somewhere, and the show wisely makes him start at square one. When Fushi achieves his earliest sentient awareness, his understanding of the world begins as rather simplistic. He, simply, is absorbing information as it comes his way, and not necessarily well. He bears little understanding of concepts like food, hygiene, or active self-preservation, just as a newborn would. As he moves through life and begins absorbing more information, he begins to take small but deliberate strides. The first half of the show is spent tracking this kind of progress, and does so compellingly. The voice acting for his character is also remarkable, especially early on when he cannot quite speak properly. The grunts, other noises, and poorly spoken words create the image of a child learning how to communicate over time. And at times, it's delightfully clumsy.
食べた。
Because the show has a lot of emotional ground to cover, it is heavily dependent on the ensemble cast in order to give Fushi something to work with. After all, a character cannot open up if there is nothing for the character to open up to. Thankfully, the show's structure affords several arcs in varying locations, and each one brings us to its particular populace. Whether it is knowing a character for a brief period of time, or even spending years with them, or even just trying to remember who they are, To Your Eternity brilliantly demonstrates that the amount of time we spend with a person is not indicative of how meaningful they are. It is the things that we do with them, they do for us, or how we grow together or apart that defines the ways in which we move and see the world. Fushi taking the white-haired boy's form before the first episode ends illustrates this point effectively, as though on some primordial level he understands that the boy does not want to be forgotten. Fushi's supernatural abilities are treated more as an accessory to the empathic journey rather than being a stand-in for the substance, and watching him grow is the show's biggest strength.
本当
バカ野郎。
But it is ironically the supernatural element that gives To Your Eternity its biggest weakness as well. As the show progresses onward and moves into newer arcs, it leans more heavily into those supernatural elements. A group of enemies, called the Knuckers, appear around Fushi as he grows and becomes stronger, attacking not only him, but also those whom Fushi has grown to care about. The way in which they impact Fushi, both directly and indirectly, offers an intriguing perspective on what it means to lose something for a character incapable of losing his life. That said, though, the Knuckers, more than anything else, serve as a threat to destroy and have some decent action scenes, as their motivations and origins are never fully answered in the time the show affords them. The show worked perfectly fine without them, and it intrudes upon the empathic element of the story that gave it its true meaning. The show's final arc is far and away the weakest portion, none the least of which because it leans the most heavily into the Knuckers storyline. It manages to do a decent job at showcasing humanity at its most grisly and nihilistic, which is an important reality for just about anyone to confront, especially for a character who cannot die. It's a great idea, but the arc itself features the worst of the ensemble cast. In prior arcs, the show managed to keep the characters we focus on, apart from Fushi, to around 2 or 3, and the last arc attempts this as well, but there are still too many players here at the end to juggle them all. The development doesn't feel sufficient, the chemistry just doesn't coalesce as cleanly as it did before. The show also causes a character to return from a previous arc, and did so in a manner so forced that it felt devoid of the shock it was supposed to carry. It also has a real problem with pacing, too. The final arc struggles the most with character dynamics and growth, while also being the longest arc in the series. This causes things to move too slowly, as the more time we spent on the island where it takes place, the more I just wanted the characters to leave. Despite the slowness, it also has moments where it turns on the gas and plows through things far too quickly. Things happen off-screen that would have been better suited to actually being shown, and worst of all is that the climactic battle toward the end wraps up so quickly that I had to wonder where all the tension went after spending so much time building it up. The last episode likewise didn't work on me emotionally either, leaving the show limping in its final hours. And it's a shame, too, because so much of the series works on an aesthetic level. The color palette employed throughout To Your Eternity makes full use of its various environments, allowing for a beautiful wash of color and light in backgrounds and foregrounds. This also translates to the character designs, both from how they look and the clothes that they wear. The only time where this doesn't feel as inviting is, again, the final arc, as so much of the landscape is craggy brown, even if you could argue that it helps establish the location's tone. While I cannot say that much of the soundtrack sticks in my memory, it never felt out of place or that it was taking away from what I was seeing, and at times it does soar. To Your Eternity is an interesting series, but one where the emotional beats and empathic connections get interrupted by some of the supernatural aspects that gave the series its life. The many environments and peoples it introduces provide glimpses into the human experience while largely avoiding needlessly excessive drama. Some of the twists couldn't impress or deliver as well, and while the show got markedly weaker as it went on, it was indeed great at first. I know that there is more story, but I'm not sure if I'll be continuing with the second season that just got announced today. The latter half of the show just didn't do it for me. Having said that, the series still has merits and I'd say is worth giving a chance, but I cannot say that I liked it. I'm just